All right, let's welcome in the next member of our panel right here, Bob Hodge. I'm used to you being on the left of me over here. It's weird to see you here on the right of me.
I hope I don't fall over.
Yeah, there we go. Some news from the Hill this week. First of all, no surprise, James Pierce declares for the NFL draft. We all knew that one. I don't think there's any need to discuss. So let's use this instead. ESPN's Chris Lowe reported this week that Tennessee and defensive coordinator Tim Banks were finalizing an extension. That was about 3 or 4 days ago. I've not seen a press release from UT yet, but Chris Lowe has great sources, especially with the agents in the world, so I would guess that is close to being finalized if it hasn't been already. Bob, the importance of keeping Tim Banks at Tennessee.
You know, I think a lot of the fans would say that, okay, great, we kept him. I'm going to say I think it's very important that they kept him because if you look in 22, it was all about the offense. Tennessee's offense, Heupel, everything's great. I think 23 and 24 have been just about as much about the defense. And the defense, I think, in 23 was underrated.
Yes.
You know, when you go back and you look at an SEC play, the points they allowed, this, that, and the other.
Top 4 in just about every main category.
And so it was underrated. This year, the defense was literally the strength of your team for most of the season. So I think keeping Banks was very important from my eyes. I actually thought that somebody would snap him up as a head coach.
Yeah, it's interesting. He
Kind
didn't
of
get much
surprised
play
that
there.
didn't happen. So I think very important.
I do too, and I do agree with the defensive numbers you talked about. 2023, they were really good. They got even better in 2024. He had 2 bad games last year, okay?
Yeah.
2. Well, Chip Kelly had a bad game as Ohio State's offense coordinator against Michigan. Yeah. You're not going to be perfect as a coordinator. And I think what he brought to the table, they don't win 10 games if their defense wasn't as good as it was. Because their offense in SEC games sputtered a little bit.
It's average.
But here's the other thing, too. 3 or 4 days ago, it's reported that they're working on a deal. Was it 3 or 4 days ago that Penn State lost its defensive coordinator to Clemson? I wonder if that's changed the dynamics.
And
Maybe
of course,
it
that's
hasn't.
where Banks was from.
Right.
Yep.
So has it changed the dynamics at all? I don't know. But I do think it's very important for Tennessee to keep Banks.
Now, Willie Martinez out of contract. Mike Eckler out of contract. No smoke, no buzz, no nothing. I would think if Tennessee was moving on, you would have heard murmurs about them looking at other people, talking to other people. Those things would have started. The fact that I haven't heard anything makes me think that they're just hammering out details and those guys are still going to be back. And so far under Heupel, that's pretty much been, he maintains the status quo for the most part. If somebody leaves, they leave and he replaces them, but we haven't seen him go dropping guillotines across the landscape so far. So, thoughts on Martinez and Eckler? Are we assuming they're back next year at this point, or is it still too early to assume?
I'm going to go ahead and assume because
you know what that does, though.
I know what it does, and you want me to say it?
No.
I'm going to go ahead and assume because I think the hiring season's almost over. I mean, it never really ends, I know, and you can hire coaches and change coaches in February, but it seems like those 2 guys. Excuse me, if they were leaving, they would have already left. That's my opinion.
I'm not going to use the word assume. I'm going to say I think that they will. Yeah, how about that? Don't get as much trouble with that one. Martinez, the secondary had its best year under him this past year. And they did it with a whole bunch of new faces, right? Because there were a ton of defensive backs that left. Some were probably encouraged to leave. Many said, they're not going to miss that guy. They're not going to miss that guy. And so they brought in some players that were a little bit unknown, but I thought the secondary had its best year under him. I think Eckler is solid. I don't think there's any reason to make a change there. So I think both will be back.
The secondary was made a lot better by Jermod McCoy last year. ESPN put out their All-American team. He was second team All-American according to ESPN. He tears his ACL while training back in Texas. Timeline-wise, that is not good. Here's my concern. One, it's going to be a race to get him back for the start of the season.
Right.
And that probably means you're not going to have him for fall camp. You're just going to be throwing him out there. Okay, so then you got to question, is he 100%? And the other thing I hate about the ACL tears, and you see it with receivers a lot, it takes 2 years for them to feel comfortable about that. And receivers will drop passes. They don't trust it. So it usually takes that second year. Will that be true of a defensive back as well, of a corner? Because it's so similar. You're playing a receiver. Are you going to trust that knee and feel good to be 100% yourself, or you always just in the back of your mind going to be holding back a little bit because, again, you see that a lot with receivers. Would you see it in the cornerback? So I think this is a huge, huge offseason story for Tennessee.
I do too. And McCoy had an excellent year. And
Yep.
look what he did against Ryan Williams at Alabama. He shut him down. They had 18 targets, and I think he caught 4 passes.
Had a
like
bad
that.
day against Ohio State,
Right.
but so has everybody else except Michigan this year.
Right, and they got schemed on that one a lot.
Yeah.
With McCoy, though, it's interesting. Syracuse is your first opponent, right? Well, if they had Kyle McCord back,
Yeah.
that would really be a concern because he led the nation in passing yards. I don't know who Syracuse's quarterback is going to be. But with McCoy, the movements of a receiver and the movements of a cornerback, as you alluded to, are similar. Now, how mentally tough is he with that? He may be okay. It may not take him another year to adjust. So we'll see. But I think he is the best defensive back they got. He's an integral part of that defense. He allows you to call defensive signals that because you can trust him with his man coverage. So they need him back, but they don't need to rush him too soon
Right.
to create another injury.
And that's, I think, what the important thing is. If he's back, they need to make sure he is back. And you're going to want him back for Syracuse regardless of the quarterback because
They are pass
doesn't
happy.
matter who it's going to be, they're going to throw it all over the place.
Yes.
So, but I would be much in favor of let's have him totally healthy for 9 games if you can get him there and not worry about the first start of the
Just
season.
get him ready for SEC play.
Exactly.
Yeah, that to me is that skyrocketed to your number one thing to watch this offseason. I mean, that is to a key player to have the ACL tear after the season. That's just rough timing. All right, when we come back, Vols are making huge money, and they're spending a ton on recruiting. Inside the University of Tennessee Athletic Department's finances, are fans happy about what they're getting for all that money? Come on back.